Hello, thank you for watching. We're looking down at the visible satellite imagery here across really the southwest part of the United States. I think there's something here kind of visible on the screen that we've been dealing with quite a bit over the last few weeks. If you look closely, I'll show you kind of what I'm eyeing here. Across California, you see these kind of like high, wispy, milky clouds here. Those are well up in the atmosphere. Those are cirrus clouds, if you look up those here on Wednesday afternoon. And they're moving quickly, kind of toward the north to the south, maybe even kind of a southeast jog here. If you look across the continental divide here into Kansas, parts of Colorado, see those high cirrus clouds there, kind of the same type of clouds, right? We were just tracking across California. Those are moving toward the northeast. And what we're seeing here is an upper level trough. That is upper level winds moving in this direction from the northwest down south up toward the northeast. That is kind of the flow, the valley, and those upper level jet stream winds that we have been watching across the western region, kind of dominating the pattern at least for the past 3, maybe even 4 weeks. That's been responsible for kind of persistent cold temperatures. It's been responsible for more snow. We've gotten an increase in snowpack here kind of late in the water year, thankfully, building up the snowpack with blizzards, high cascade snowfall. Very often the forecasts have involved multiple feet of snow, not just a considerable amount of inches, but we measure in feet at times, and that has been the pattern. It's changing. Now it hasn't changed here today, right? We still drawing troughs across the western US, but it's changing, I think, over the next few days. I think coming into this weekend, give you a hint as to what's to come. Finally getting maybe some warmer weather in. We have some other weather to deal with right now because of this trough, as you might imagine. If you look closely over central and eastern Arizona, we can see some spotty showers here over the central and eastern part of the state. If you look up farther toward the northwest region of the U.S., you can kind of see, I know it'll be hard to see when it gets posted to video, but there's the Cascades there poking through some of the low clouds there. But we're watching really a very heavy snowfall event unfold for parts of the Rockies and the Front Range of Colorado, again, connected to this trough that we're watching building in across the western region. Again, you can see those high clouds too. If we look here over Oregon, Washington, look how quickly they're racing out of Canada. That's the jet stream. We call it the jet stream because these winds are moving so quickly here. And then flip to the other side of the continental divide and the winds are coming up now, moving right in the northerly or northeasterly direction there. Looking a little bit closer here, the upper Snake River Valley, you can see kind of in the middle, stuck in the middle of this trough here, we have some snow showers here over in the middle Snake River. Temperatures are high enough, not even seeing some clouds there, but a little bit warmer toward Boise. Snow showers there in the Snake River Valley. If I jump over and show you the National Weather Service, these are all the different advisories active here across the counties in the western region. This is valid around lunchtime here for the Pacific time in the western U.S. The pink here you can see in Colorado, parts of Wyoming. These are winter storm warnings. Again, expecting a tremendous amount of snow here for parts of the Front Range, Boulder, Denver area, some other metro areas involved in this. The kind of lighter pink, it looks, I mean, at least on this map, it looks almost exactly the same color. This is a red flag warning. So strong winds coming around the base of that trough, coming into western Texas, eastern New Mexico, prompting wildfire concerns there. That's an area where just recently we saw wildfires spring up in a big way, causing a number of issues there. If you look closer over here on the west coast of California, this kind of, what is this? It's almost like a mustard orange color here. Those are high wind warnings. So up in the upper elevations of the Sierra Nevadas, you can imagine with that jet stream coming down like this, those very fast upper level winds, and you put mountains up into the jet stream, you're going to get those upper level winds here at the crest of the Sierras. That includes some of the transverse ranges here in Southern California. The lighter beige color, these are wind advisories here for the Sacramento Valley, even parts of the Bay Area here. Again, not super strong winds, what we'd consider maybe damaging threshold, but enough if it's your trash day to bother your trash cans, rustle some leaves, could have some small limbs down as well in some of these lighter beige areas here. I will pick on one area in particular. If you look closely at Southern California, some of these areas aren't necessarily at elevation. And that's because at the base of this trough with these winds coming around, that produces a high pressure. In the inland areas of the western U.S., you naturally then have a low pressure over the coastline, and that pushes the air right up and over these transverse ranges. And as it comes down, it's heating, it's gaining some momentum, and that is your Santa Ana winds in Southern California. In fact, very kind of applicably and relevant, Santa Ana, one of the areas here, we're going to see some very strong wind gusts over tonight, I think, and then peaking really sometime tomorrow morning. Some of these wind gusts crossing over that damaging thresholds, right? 55, 60, 65 mile an hour gusts, that's enough to start to cause some issues. Might even start getting into power outages at that point. So watching an area here, again, kind of the Santa Ana, California area south of Anaheim, in this area here between San Diego and Los Angeles. Some of the elevation here on the transverse ranges and some of the coastal ranges here seeing some appreciable wind gusts as well, where can't rule out some stronger winds getting into some of the valley populated areas here. Not quite as strong as we're expecting, again, around that well-monikered Santa Ana area. If we look big picture up at those jet stream level winds, we figured out where these were flowing ourselves with that visible satellite imagery. But here's where they're positioned, kind of right over Washington, south across the western U.S., and then spinning up into middle part of the country here. What's changing now from what we've seen here recently, maybe over the last 3 to 4 weeks, is Hawaii is here on this image. North of Hawaii, we've very often, at least over the last month, had an upper level ridge. That is kind of that mountain and that jet stream level flow. That naturally, if you put a ridge here, tends to produce a trough over the western U.S. That's brought in what we mentioned: precipitation, snow, cold temperatures, frost concerns over and over and over again over the last 3 to 4 weeks through February into March. But if you look closely north of Hawaii, we don't really have that ridge there anymore. That ridge is starting to push east now over parts of British Columbia, all the way kind of getting in almost over western Oregon and Washington here. And really north of Hawaii, now we have a large upper level trough, the opposite, if anything, than a ridge. It's that pattern change we're watching now. As that trough builds in, it's going to push that ridge up and over the western U.S. here. And this is, I think, what's going to change the pattern around in terms of temperatures and in terms of precipitation. And then just one way to visualize kind of the last 3 to 4 weeks, these are temperature anomalies, color-coded here. So where you see these very warm or red colors, that's where we've had a very warm. And I put this, I think, February 10th to March 12th, so really kind of the last month or so. We've been cold here across the west. We've had that troughing position, something like this, not dissimilar from what we're seeing here today on Wednesday afternoon. That tends to, again, in the atmosphere, what goes up tends to come down, what goes down goes up. So as you have a trough here over the western U.S., that produces a ridge over the central and eastern U.S., and that's brought in the warm temperatures over the Midwest and the Corn Belt, where we're dealing with some dryness in this area here. Again, this is looking like it's going to change at least over the next 7 days. We'll get into the long-range forecast in just a bit here. I want to show you the jet stream level forecast here. We just looked at the winds as they were valid here as of Wednesday afternoon. There's that upper level ridge that we're watching, and that color is almost exactly what I was drawing over. So let's make that a little more visible. So we can see those upper level winds here. That is our ridge, kind of drawing the axis of that right over parts of British Columbia. I'm going to play this forecast forward now, overnight into Wednesday night, and I'll push this over toward the weekend here through Thursday, into Friday, now into Saturday, March 16th. That upper level ridge becoming very dominant over British Columbia and Canada, dominant over parts of Washington, northern Idaho, Montana, Oregon as well. But what we do have, unfortunately, to deal with over the next 7 days is what we call these cutoff lows, and these are not uncommon in kind of these the spring and fall or the equinoctial times a year here across the western U.S. You get these cutoff lows stuck underneath an upper level ridge. This is what we sometimes call a Rex block over the western U.S. These tend to stick around for a while, so maybe over the next 7 to 14 days where we have this upper level trough here positioned over parts of Arizona, Nevada, upper level ridge here across parts of the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. The kind of quick story here is where this kind of ridge is dominating the pattern. We'd expect warmer, drier conditions underneath that. Where this upper level trough is positioned, we'd expect cooler temperatures underneath that and probably some heavy precip, or at least more precipitation and cloudiness here, at least on the eastern side of that, sprinkling in some showers here on the backside, California as well. This forecast now valid as of Saturday. I'm going to play this forward into next week so we can get an idea of where that trough might be going and where that ridge is going. So I play this from the Sunday now, ultimately into Monday the 18th, out into Tuesday. All the while, at least as I played that forecast out the next 72 hours, that trough now weakening over parts of Nevada and Arizona. That upper level ridge not as dominant, but overspreading more of the western U.S., so parts of California, Montana, Idaho, getting into dominating maybe even parts of Nevada at this point as that upper level trough tends to wane. I think through maybe the middle part of that next week, looking for that trough to weaken and maybe exit out of the area. What does this mean in terms of just the 7-day forecast, warmer, colder, wetter, drier, etc.? Jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast for precipitation. I will play this over that same 7-day time period that we just walked through. So this is looking out into Thursday now, March 14th, now into Friday. And really, with the conditions underneath that upper level trough being disturbed, we see More precipitation in parts of central and southeastern Arizona, perhaps some snow showers in northern Arizona at higher elevations here. That includes parts of Nevada. Maybe some spotty showers at times at the upper elevations and the transverse regions here in California through the weekend. And into early next week, not expecting a ton of precipitation to get into some of the populated areas further toward the south or southwest. But again, as I play this into Sunday, now into Monday, into Tuesday, that trough's still lingering there. You can see some afternoon showers popping up each day, but it's weakening as we go through each day in that 7-day forecast. Ultimately, until next week, kind of not really seeing the effects of it, as we potentially have another system to watch coming into some part of the western U.S., maybe the Pacific Northwest, maybe more California or Oregon, getting out into the end of next week. Not too many details on that. The models are kind of going back and forth on that, so don't want to put too much weight into that. But at least over the next 7 days, if we look at precipitation departures, big swath of dryness here across parts of the Northwest. That would be western Washington, parts of Idaho, Oregon, central and northern California as well. Looking at that pattern change with that upper level ridge dominating over parts of the Northwest. That's really changing the pattern here from what was pretty wet, especially in this corridor. We talked about the blizzard in the Sierra Nevadas. We talked about all the snow and the rain in the Klamath Mountains, parts of Oregon, the Willamette Valley. This shifting drier here over the next 7 days, save for this trough here spinning over parts of Arizona, bringing some snow showers to northern Arizona, rain showers to central and southeastern Arizona, and perhaps to other areas in the desert southwest. But if you look over into Southern California, not a ton of precipitation getting in to the backside there. So that's kind of one area we're watching. Maybe some increased precipitation here in parts of the desert portions of Eastern California, but not a ton of precip getting into the Los Angeles or San Diego area, save for some afternoon shower chances as those kind of bubble along the higher elevations there. If we look at the temperature anomalies over the next 7 days, again from the ECMWF, this is kind of looking through Thursday of tomorrow all the way out into Thursday of next week. Warmer temperatures kind of dominating that same area where we talked about drier conditions persisting over the next 7 days. Underneath that trough with more rain and clouds, expecting cooler conditions, right, with the sun blocked out. Not looking at freeze concerns here underneath that upper level trough. Those aren't tend to be big freeze or frost concern makers, but at least cooler conditions averaged over the next 7 days. Again, kind of positioned right where that trough will be spinning. Want to take a look at the long-range forecast getting out into the end of next week. I mentioned the possibility, and we are watching a position for maybe a return of a trough, maybe some sort of system coming through at the end of next week to kind of kick out that upper level ridge. And I'll just show you the forecast going forward here. This is from the European model ensemble, and we're looking at those jet stream level winds. This is valid as of tomorrow morning. And to kind of orient ourselves with what we've been talking about, here's that trough that we just looked at earlier. That's been shifting. It'll shift east overnight tonight into Wednesday into Thursday, such that it's positioned more over parts of Colorado and Utah. So take the forecast forward into Friday and Saturday. We've already talked about that upper level ridge. That's right there. That's dominating parts of the Northwest. There is that upper level trough, kind of hard to see there over parts of southern Nevada. So play this into Tuesday. Now Wednesday the 20th, Thursday the 21st. I can kind of see two things changing as we go out into next week here from the European model. One is the subtropical jet is strengthening down near California, northern Mexico, and we can see that here. It's still kind of positioned a little bit further south than we saw it when it was inducing those kind of atmospheric river events across parts of California and Oregon. It's still shunted to the south. And actually, you know, maybe is drawing my eye a little bit more. If you look toward the north of it, we see what is kind of an upper level trough trying to develop again over parts of the western U.S. Not the most potent or obvious, at least on this map, but if you look closely at the streamlines here, see these upper level winds kind of coming down, forming. There's that kind of quintessential U or that trough shape we look for in those upper level winds. So we could be looking at a return to more inclement, a little bit cooler, more precipitation here across the western U.S. as we get out into the end of next week, maybe even going into next week and talking about the 22nd, the 23rd, the 24th of March. With this subtropical jet stream a little more active, kind of coming up near San Diego, parts of Southern California and Arizona, could also see some showers pushing into this area again, kind of over that same time period here. This is really a kind of a 9 to 10 day forecast at this point, so no confident details, but I would say looking warmer certainly for this kind of northern and western area of the western U.S. over the next 7 days, but could be shifting out of that as we go toward next weekend, at least if this ECMWF ensemble forecast is to be believed. If we jump over and look at the GFS ensemble over that same time period, I'll make this valid kind of on Saturday morning of the 23rd. If you look closely, you can see that subtropical jet stream maybe shunted a little bit further south than the European model has it. But again, if you look closely at those streamlines, a little bit of troughing action here over parts of the Pacific Northwest. That could bring in some cooler weather for parts of the Northwest, maybe the central western region, and some heavier precipitation in kind of maybe a region like that. So seeing some agreement, at least from the Eastern WF, along with the GFS, maybe some more inclement weather kind of pushing out toward next weekend. But we have, kind of a 7 to 8 day stretch here that we can enjoy, at least for parts of the West that don't include maybe eastern and northern Arizona. One thing that might be playing a role, we talked about that subtropical jet stream kind of developing more strength and then inching up closer to California, the Matt and Julian oscillation, which really haven't been talking about too much because it's been over in the other hemisphere here. It is now forecast to push across the Pacific Ocean and eventually get into the Eastern Pacific here, kind of right around that same time, the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, out into the end of next week. We talked earlier in January and February about when the MJO does get into the Pacific, it makes that race from the Western Pacific to the Eastern Pacific like it's forecast here from the ECMWF. The expectation is we reinvigorate that subtropical jet that can at times bring about those atmospheric rivers we've talked about. We didn't quite see that on the forecast. It was kind of shifted a little bit too far south. It wasn't this big long Pacific jet extension all the way across the Pacific, but nonetheless could return some precipitation chances around the 21st, 22nd, 23rd out into next weekend, perhaps for parts of southern or central California with the MJO moving in that direction. Look at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. This is from the Climate Prediction Center issued here today. They don't have as strong of a cool signal, kind of getting out over that same time period, March 21st through the 27th here. Not the warmest, save for maybe parts of Nevada or Utah, and maybe just a sliver of cooler than average temperature chances here in far southern and far southern Arizona. Really, they're kind of where their take on this is heavier precipitation. Again, not the strongest precipitation signal you'll get from the Climate Prediction Center, like something we're looking at here in the southeast. But with that trough trying to push back into the area over maybe parts of Oregon, Northern California, something like this, with that reinvigorated subtropical jet stream trying to push back up into the area, it does make sense that we're seeing some increased precipitation probabilities out toward the end of next week and into next weekend for the western U.S. We just don't have the details to say, hey, it's going to be super wet in Southern California, it's going to be super wet here in Southern Oregon, Northern California. That's not a thing we can talk about too much in terms of that 8, 9, 10 day plus type of forecast, but the chances there. Jumping over, this is the ECMWF, so the European model forecast, the extended forecast. So looking at a 30-day period from March 21st, kind of looking out even beyond that, March 21st, all the way out to April 21st. So a 30-day forecast here for temperatures. I think in the last video I mentioned that this kind of extended forecast from ECMWF was shifting a little warmer for the western U.S. Well, if anything, it's shifted back now, cooler for the western region as we go into the month of April here. You can see that pretty obvious here from the forecast. Now, there are probably kind of two things at play here. One, we did see maybe a cooler shift in that long-range forecast, that 7 to 10 days that we just talked about over the last kind of 3 tabs there. We also have a lot of snowpack in this area here. We're not going to show it in this video because we haven't had any too much recent snow, but a lot of snowpack here across kind of the Intermountain West Basin. We saw increased snowpack in the Sierra Nevadas, of course, from the blizzard. We're going to see increased snowfall here from the trough coming through here Wednesday into Thursday for parts of the Front Range in Colorado. And sometimes the models assimilate that increased snowfall, that increased snowpack, that brings temperatures down across the western U.S., and that can affect that forecast going out into 30 days. That's not necessarily incorrect or unwise of the model to say there's more snowpack, it's going to be colder. That, in fact, makes sense. But sometimes they can get a little bit too stuck on that snowpack signal and keep things colder than average a little bit longer than maybe they actually will. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen this time, but it just does throw a little bit of skepticism into this long-range forecast, I think, from the ECMWF right now. Not totally sold we're going to see these cold temperatures persist out into April. We've seen a lot of it, at least over February and early March here, but we'll keep an eye on the signal. Certainly don't want to rule out that possibility as well. If we look at the precipitation signal over that same time period, not the wettest for the West Coast, so parts of the Willamette Valley, Western Washington, the Cascades, the Sierra Nevadas. That's the wrong color to draw for a kind of a dry area, but this is an area not looking at a ton of precipitation here, seeing more precipitation in that same extended 30-day forecast into April for wetter signal here over the Intermountain West. What I'm kind of seeing here with the cold temperatures that were forecasted here on the page just before, The higher precipitation anomalies forecast, I'm seeing a trough here that they're trying to forecast, maybe something positioned a little bit like this. That would keep things a little bit drier here over the western U.S., colder across the Intermountain West, and bring about kind of afternoon snow and rain shower chances across parts of the Intermountain West. Something like that would also, again, fuel more rain in the eastern U.S., the southeastern U.S., like that's forecasted here. So, you know, again, not saying that that exact kind of regime is going to set up, but I think that's what the ECMWF is trying to forecast there, a persistent trough over parts of the western U.S. that would bring temperatures down in this area, bring the rain up in the eastern half of the country, and some showers here over the Intermountain West. We'll see, you know, where that happens. Again, I think it might be putting too much weight into the extra snowpack here, such that maybe it won't be this cold as we get into April, but we'll keep an eye on that going forward. Speaking of cold temperatures, one thing that we've been watching, we talked about it last week, is cold temperatures in the central tropical Pacific ocean waters, because cold temperatures there are La Niña, and that is kind of the talk of the town right now in terms of we're still in El Niño right now, we're weakening out of that, going to weaken out of El Niño at some point here this summer. Do we weaken so far, or do we cool the temperatures off in the central Pacific such that we sink into a La Niña before next water year, right? Because that brings about conversations of drought in California or Arizona or the Colorado River Basin. Could bring about more precipitation. We talked about parts of the northern Cascades and the northern Rockies that didn't do so well this water year. That's an El Nino correlation that we see fairly consistently. La Nina would increase the chances of precipitation for parts of the Cascades, parts of the northern Rockies, and help them out where their reservoirs are suffering just a little bit here at the end of this water year. So La Nina, big question going forward. We saw this kind of little cold eddies start to race across the Pacific here. If you look really closely along the equator here, west of the Galapagos Islands, there's that little strip of colder water here in the central tropical Pacific. Is this kind of the beginning of our La Nina? That's the question right now. Again, not the biggest signal, not the biggest swath of colder water. In order to get into a La Nina, we got to take colder water from here, develop it here, and bring it into the central Pacific. And we're certainly not seeing that here on March 12th, 2024. If you look in the central tropical Pacific, the area where we're really measuring El Nino, we're still warm there. So there's your El Nino continuing going forward. We are in a La Nina watch per the Climate Prediction Center, so the chances are elevated we do get into a La Nina at some point this year. We aren't seeing it yet. If it does develop, this will certainly, looking back, be one of the earlier signs of it. If we look at the ECMWF forecast for those ocean temperatures in the middle of the Pacific, I'll make this valid for March here. This is kind of similar to what we were just looking at, right? We saw those warm waters in the central Pacific along the equator. That's our El Nino. If we look in the eastern Pacific, where those cooler La Nina waters tend to start out, you can see a little bit of a weakening in those warmer ocean temperatures here. As I take that forecast into April of 2024 from the ECMWF seasonal model here, you can see those cold temperatures developing off the west coast of South America, the warmer temperatures here in the central tropical Pacific weakening. If I take this into May, you can see those stretching further west across the Pacific. I take those into June. Finally, into July, we're starting to finally cool off the ocean temperatures in the central Pacific, moving the cold water here out of the eastern Pacific with those stronger trade winds toward the central Pacific. Take the forecast into August, now into September. Now this would be something kind of like a weak to moderate La Nina from the ECMWF getting out into September of 2024. This is one forecast from the ECMWF. In fact, the ECMWF has been a little bit slower to develop La Nina. Some models have been trying to aggressively develop it, maybe even by this summer. I think if it does develop, I could see something of a little bit more slow development like this from the ECMWF. Kind of curiously here, it does cool off the waters just a little bit here off the coast of California. Actually, these are a little bit warmer right now. If I jump over and show you the sea surface temperature anomalies just off the west coast of the U.S. Yes, they're colder here in the Northeast Pacific, kind of this PDO look, but if you look really closely off the coast of Washington, California, and Oregon here, these water temperatures are actually warmer. It's very different from what we saw last spring. These water temperatures were much, much colder. That induced May gray that extended well beyond May, induced colder temperatures, a lack of GDD accumulations along coastal areas in the coastal valley, maybe even affecting parts of the Central Valley at times. Not seeing that this year, so not expecting that same type of regime as we go into spring here. But we are keeping an eye on the colder waters here in the Eastern Pacific in terms of whether we get into a negative PDO. When we see La Nina develop in the Central Pacific in the waters here, we tend to see a negative PDO develop here as well. What I mean by that is colder ocean temperatures, similar to this look here, but extending all the way over to the coast of California, Oregon, and Washington as well. Not seeing that yet, kind of a little bit of a disagreement. Warmer water here, colder water here in the eastern Pacific, so keep an eye on that going forward as well. And again, not seeing that La Nina developing, certainly not here today on Wednesday. We'll see how quickly it develops. If it does, it's going to develop here first in the eastern Pacific and start to push west across the central Pacific, like we saw from the ECMWF forecast that we're looking at here. If we look at the ECMWF forecast, these are a number of different ensemble members. Their forecast for El Nino versus La Nina going out into the future. I think we looked at this last week and potentially the week before as well. I'm showing you this because these are all the different scenarios that we could see going through summer and then ultimately into next water year when it would be most relevant for the West Coast and parts of the Western U.S. Some of these members developing La Nina pretty quickly. These ones down here at the bottom, maybe even by July, August, or September, looking at a La Nina. Some of these getting into a moderate La Nina, even by fall. Some of the members staying more neutral, some of them even staying on the positive side where those kind of warmer ocean waters that are currently there in the Central Pacific persist, such that we have a very weak or slightly positive neutral toward El Nino situation. I don't think that's likely, just seeing how quickly it's fading here and expected to fade over the next few months. But we could see something maybe like a more middle solution where we don't quite dip into La Nina territory until some point next winter. Of course, that could matter in terms of the forecast. We saw a late arrival of El Nino at the end of last year. I think that pushed off a little bit of the precipitation and the snow here until the end of the water year like we just saw. So the rate of development from La Nina matters, along whether it's going to happen and the magnitude as well. All things we're going to have to keep an eye on going through this summer here. I think this forecast will get a little bit more clear. One thing we do know is that these forecasts for La Nina and El Nino are far from perfect. There are times when a forecast will look something like this and the actual development will do something like that, almost out of the range of suggested possibilities. It could be somewhere near the bottom of that confidence window as well. So this is, they're far from perfect. The spread here is something to definitely be mindful of going forward. I think that's my last tab. That's all I have for you all here today. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you all next week.